We also have to think about cultures and the social cultures and the rules that have been dictated within each culture. Some cultures have to maintain eye gaze, like for a deaf person, you have to maintain eye contact. If you don't, it's rude. It means you're not interested or you don't want to listen to that person. But in the Chinese culture, they look down. They will not do eye gaze because it's a sign of disrespect if you look into that person's eyes. So we do have to be sensitive, again, like I said, to pay attention to other people's cultures within the communication realm. We also have to think about the physical space too. There are some cultures, like for example, like a lot of people say white people. A lot of people believe that white people are very resistant to physical touch. They'll just handshake and stuff like that. But in the Hispanic culture, a lot of times they'll come up and hug each other very tightly. And they have more physical closeness. In the deaf culture, typically they'll hug and then they'll tap 3 times. That's just a part of the deaf culture. That's the part of the deaf way. Now, when we talk about degree of directness, okay, we're going to talk about 4 different kinds of language. If that person is not being very clear and they beat around the bush, then we know that it's not as explicit. Where we know in ASL and in the deaf world, we know everybody's very blunt and very explicit. Hearing people in the hearing world, especially American culture, we learn how to talk around the subject and not really directly say things how it should be. We use things like ill-equivocal language. We use euphemistic language. We use abstract language and passive voice construction. Those are the typical things of the degree of directness that we use in our language. Ill-equivocal language means that you're going to have a language where you deliberately use specific words like buck or pitcher or battery. All of those words have specific meaning, but they can be used in more than one way. Like, for example, like buck, okay? When we think about buck, is it like the deer buck, or is it a buck knife, or did you get bucked off? Is there a bucking off of the horse? Like, what does that mean? There's all those different ways to use buck. Then when you think about pitcher, is it a pitcher from a baseball game, or is it a pitcher you put water in? What kind of pitcher is it? They all have different meanings. Same as with battery. Battery means like the battery for a car or for in a beating. What are you talking about? What kind of battery? The word is exactly the same, but it has a different meaning. That can cause a lot of misconcepts and misunderstandings. When we talk about euphemistic language, that's where we as a culture want to soften the language. We don't want it to be so harsh, so we try to powder it up a little bit, make it all fluffy and nice in a nice little package. Like the person will say, if the person dies, they'll say, oh, they went to sleep with the angels. But you'll never hear them say, oh, that girl just died. You don't typically hear that. Usually we want to soften the blow. So we need it to be easier for us to actually handle the language coming in. And usually you don't hear like person, oh my God, that person's so fat. Usually they'll say, oh, that person's gained a bit of weight. But in deaf culture, because they're so blunt, a deaf person will be, oh, that person is fat, extremely fat, and they ate a lot and died. That's who they are. And they're not trying to be mean or rude, but deaf people do that. And it's not that they don't understand, but they don't use that kind of language to cover up because it is a direct language. They don't ever hide the truth or, talk and beat around the bush. I'll talk more about that in other slides. Now we're going to talk about abstract language. When we talk about abstract language, usually that's like shorthand, you would call it, where it doesn't have specific information. telling you the details of everything. And in the deaf community, we know that it's highly detailed language, and so it's very hard because you don't know who did what, and you want to be able to give that information out in ASL. But with abstract language, many times you don't know who did what where. You just don't know. There's just no way. So we can't always follow our own grammatical structure within ASL because we don't understand what's going on within the English abstract language. Like it says, okay, I want freedom. Well, from what? What do they want the freedom? Do they want freedom from this house? Do they want freedom from no children? Do they want freedom from what? It's just too broad. You can't specify or give me enough details. In the deaf community, they prefer to have all that detail-oriented information. Or if you said something like "love is never wrong," okay, maybe that's true. Well, maybe it's a prostitute, and if you want to have a one-night stand with that person, love is never wrong. Okay, well, some people would view that, yes, that is wrong. Okay, so you see, you don't really know what's going on. So it is definitely a shorthand. Another challenging thing that's in English that we have to deal with as interpreters, it's extremely challenging, is passive voice construction. And a lot of times when people are talking about this, it's not overtly clear on who's doing what where. For example, is I can be stopped. Okay, stop from what? You can be stopped walking, you can stop your body. What's going to be stopped? What can you be stopped? Driving, stopped what? It's open-ended. You don't know what's going to happen in it. It causes you to want more, to ask for more. But many times hearing people will just say that, and it won't be overtly stated. And so deaf people will sometimes ask, well, what are they talking about? And it's like, well, we don't really know because the hearing person didn't state it. Now, whenever we're talking about this is very important whenever we're talking about voicing for a deaf person. I see this happen a lot where you're struggling to voice for a deaf person and you're using a lot of fillers like ums and uhs and well and oh. Yeah, that causes a lot of problems because if I'm an interpreter and I'm voicing and I'm using that, but the deaf person is not, we're causing disempowerment actually because we're using powerless speech. We're making that deaf person look like they are using powerless speech. And it's not right. Now, if the deaf person is signing and they're like, let me see, well, hold on, let me think. Okay, that's an example, okay? If it looks like that, that is fine. Please use the powerless fillers, okay? Use it, because that's a representation of their language. It's powerless, okay? That's okay, you can use that kind of language. But most of the time what happens is interpreters will be doing that, and if they don't understand and they're trying to figure out what the deaf person is saying, they will use those fillers while they're trying to figure out what's happening. And that's just not appropriate because it changes the status and the person that is actually speaking. It changes all of that, and that's not good. So if you do any of that, please try to curb that as much as possible now. So it'll help yourself with speeches as well as it'll help your career as an interpreter. Now, when we talk about powerful language, mainly we're talking about language that doesn't represent any type of hemming and hawing, those kind of things. You use more direct approach, stronger word choice, better word choices, clearer sentences, correct grammatical structure. That's powerful language. Now, when we talk about responsible language, you need to make sure that you're going to indicate personal responsibility and you need to make sure that you're going to make sure you represent that person as much as possible, saying, I did this, or she did this, or whatever, instead of using other language that doesn't claim responsibility, it's very important that we pay attention to that. When we talk about linguistic register, understand that we have several different levels of register, and based off of our communication and based off of the setting that we're in. So the 5 levels are, we have frozen, formal, consultative, casual, and intimate. Okay? Now, all of these are based off of specific turn. The register will be determined based off of turn taking. It will show you also how complex sentences or the structure of sentences can be in the communication process. Also, word choices and the vocabulary that you'll use in each setting or each register. It also will show you the way that you sign or the way that you speak. Each of the volume of speech or signs change dramatically through each one. Now, when we talk about your register, it's going to depend on the rate of speech or signs that you actually use, the clarity of your speech or signs that you use. And remember, the speaker's goal is always in there. And also how you use fillers or hesitations or hemming and hawing. And then allow the topics that you discuss during that time. So, when we talk about the different register levels in English, when we talk about intimate, that typically is friends or family. There, you sign smaller. It's not going to be very erratic. Your signing space is much smaller. You know more vocabulary, or you're more familiar with those people because it's intimate register. But if you're an interpreter in that situation, it makes it very challenging. And it's the most challenging you can be in because those people already have that intimate knowledge and background. And a lot of times the interpreter is not privy to the background or that information, just like in VRS. That's typically very intimate because you're calling between 2 individuals that actually know each other and have that inside information, so it's very difficult. When you talk about casual register, that's typically in a social event, like if you're with your cohorts where you're working and if you have to go interpret like for a business, social, something like that. It has some intimate information, but you don't have to be extremely knowledgeable in everything, and your signs are still in a smaller area. When you talk about consultative, I say that wrong every time. The first one, intimate, you have a lot of turn taking as well as in casual. Now in consultative, that's more where you have intimate register. At the same time, you also have consultative register, where that person is the leader in the group, where they have more information. Like if you're at a counseling meeting, and that person typically will speak the most and leads the discussion. So consultative is always going to be one person that has more knowledge. Formal typically means that you're going to be on a stage, you're going to sign much larger, your grammar is going to be structured much better than in the intimate setting. Your signs will be clearer, more crisp, and more understandable. In frozen register, it does not exist in ASL. There's no form of frozen register, but in English we definitely have it, just like the Lord's Prayer, the National Anthem, the Pledge. All of those are frozen text. Those are examples of frozen text. But ASL does not have any frozen text whatsoever. So that's all of Chapter 1. I hope you enjoyed yourself. I hope that really got you thinking about a lot of stuff. Make sure you do your homework, and I'll see you next time.